Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the ItCast, Real Talk on Sex. I am your host, Nika Sherelle. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. This episode is brought to you by the House of Sherelle and the Trigger Happy Toy. You can find more about that at triggerhappytoy.com. It's also brought to you by the International Institute for Sexual Empowerment, a 501c3 nonprofit that creates a safe space to talk about sex. You can check out the events calendar at iiseglobal.org or nikasherels.com to see information about our upcoming events. If you would like to get one on one coaching with me, please visit my Calendly to book a free connection session. I want to know how I can serve and support you. Please be in communication. Uh, Ask us anything. We want to hear from you. Please send in your questions so you can have them answered on the show. Get access to our bonus content on Patreon. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. Okay, everybody. So, this is our series finale. And I want to thank everyone out there for having been with us on this journey. It is my honor and my privilege to bring you real talk on the gift of life. Today in the booth, we have Pam Ross and Jordan Ross. I'm going to have you each come on and just say a little bit about yourself before we get started. Go, hello, hello.
Hey,
Uh, you look great today.
Thank you, thank you.
You too.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
both of you. Yeah.
Pam, why don't you take a second to just give us a little bit about yourself?
well, my name is Pam, and I'm 74 years old. And I grew up in New Jersey and moved to California as soon as I was old enough to have a real life away from the family that I grew up in. And most of my life here has been as a massage therapist, working in senior homes, and now I do private care in individual homes, and do art and have a happy life right now.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. And Jordan, give us a snapshot.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm Pam's son. I am from here. I'm from Oakland, California, and I've spent pretty much my whole life here. Um, I think the most notable thing about me, as I don't know about notable, but maybe the most defining characteristic I have is that my family is just me and my mom. I don't have a dad. I was um, Yeah, that's the only family I know, and but I don't particularly think it defines me. Um, yeah, it's just what I know, and so um, other than that, live a pretty simple life. I don't know.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yes. So I know I want to get into some of your backstory. And one of the things, just to let everyone out there know, this episode is really about tapping into and understanding what it means to have children that are from donors. So, whether it's sperm donor, egg donor, anything like that, the opportunity to have life where life wouldn't normally be is the conversation that we're pulling into this space. So, I know there were a couple of snippets from the memoir that you might want to share. Were you able to find those?
No,
No problem.
no,
No,
but I know pretty much my story.
of course, of course. So then let's start. Let's start with your parents. When we were speaking before, you mentioned there's some stuff there. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in a family. I had an older sister, and both of my parents were alcoholics. They died alcoholics, and they basically didn't talk to me very much at all. When I was born, my maternal grandmother moved in with us and basically took care of me. And her and I were a team from the beginning moment to the ending moment. And life was hard. I snuck around, I grew up in New Jersey. So I was in and out of the bars in Newark, New Jersey when I was 16 and 17. Um, I did get pregnant with a man who was quite a bit older, African American man in the bars. And I had a coat hanger abortion when I was 18. My friends' parents helped me find someone that could do that. And it was a pretty long process as we tried several different things. We tried uh, shots in New York City to help abort, and we tried to get some pills. The person never showed up, and then finally we found this woman who would perform the abortion, and it was a very long process because I was close to 4 months pregnant at that point, and um, abortion was illegal. So we had to be very careful. And also, we had to be very, very careful because my friend and her parents were also African American. And if they had gotten caught, we had gotten caught at any time, it would have been really awful. My parents were racist um, and kind of bullies. So as soon as I was able to leave home, I came to California to find a better life for myself and to find freedom.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. That's really, really beautiful. And I want to know a bit more about what a coat hanger abortion actually is, because I think I have an idea, but I've never actually been told. So what is that? What was that process?
Well, what they do is they take a plastic tube like a straw, very flexible, and break open uh, the coat hanger and put the one end of it into the tube, and so it makes the tube stiff. And then they insert it into your cervix. And then after the tube is inserted into your cervix, they pull out the hanger part. And what it does is it creates airflow through the tube and into the uterus, into the cervix. And that is what aborts you. And so the coat hanger itself doesn't ever touch your body. Everything is sterilized. The woman who did it was a nurse, although I agreed to never admit that she was a nurse so she wouldn't get in trouble. And I went to her house a couple of mornings in a row and just hung out there waiting and waiting and waiting. And it took like 4 days. And then finally I was on the toilet and the fetus came out and she took it away and that was it. And I never saw her after that.
Yeah.
But it was scary only in that I was afraid my parents would find out and catch me. Mostly I trusted the process. I trusted my friend's family to take care of me and know what they were doing for me. And I feel very, very grateful. My friend's father um, arranged the whole thing, and he used to drop me off when I would visit my friend, uh, drop me off a block away from my house so my parents wouldn't see me with a black man.
Mhm.
Right before he died, Jordan and I were going to go to New Jersey and see him, but COVID hit and we had to cancel like a week before. And then he passed after that. But was able to tell him that I was grateful for what he had done and how he risked his life for me,
Right.
basically.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Well put.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in the history of that, and I will get back to the conversation around abortion later. But I want to know, what was it like to want kids later in life?
I had always wanted to have a kid, partly because kids were the only people I really could relate to. I didn't somehow relate to adults at all. Um, But when I go to parties, I was always in the room where the little kids were hanging out, playing with them and hanging out. And I felt like they were the only people that I could be myself with. I don't feel like I was particularly intellectual, but I could be there with my emotions, with my heart, with my silliness, and that we kind of related to each other. And it was always fun. So there were a couple of instances. One, it was a cold night, and I was walking up to Piedmont Avenue to get a yogurt. And I passed this woman with her little girl who was probably like 3 or 4. And it was very cold. And as I passed them, the little girl goes, "We don't have our coats and sweaters. We don't have our coats and sweaters." And I kind of laughed, and they ended up at the yogurt store, and I ended up at the yogurt store. And so they had their yogurt, I had my yogurt, and we talked for a minute. And then the mother came over to me and whispered, "My daughter just said that you were going to be her new best friend." And I practically cried all the way home. I felt like that was the heart. That was the heart. Yes, I could be her best friend for that moment, if not forever. And that was where I was really drawn to. I have to do this. I want to do this because this is who I am. And I started the process. I had a girlfriend at the time. We put notices up in the Castro looking for a donor. We didn't find what we were looking for, although we got a lot of responses. And then her and I broke up, and I continued the process with the idea that if I went 100% forward until no became the answer, that I either would or I wouldn't, and either way, it would be okay. If no became the answer at the moment that the doctor was going to insert the sperm, then no would be the answer. And no never came up, and there's Jordan.
How does that make you feel, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, it feels, it feels good, of course, but I think, I mean, all families are different, right? But it's her choice, and the choice of many, right, is very, very active, right? Very much, I want this more than anything else, right? Or I want this is very much what I want with my life, right? And certainly, all children are wonderful, right? But to be actively chosen, right? And to be really having to for someone to push and push to get what they've wanted for so long, right? And I think is very, it's obviously an honor, right? And a responsibility, I think. And just, yeah, I mean, it's a very meaningful thing to hear and to say and to experience. And I think, yeah, it feels good. I mean, I think I'm grateful to be here, right? And I think my mom's a wonderful mom, and although she won't always feel that way, but yeah, I mean, I'm very, very lucky, and I think not everyone who was in her shoes in the 90s had the opportunity or had the support or had the understanding of or the understanding of what they needed to do or could do. They didn't or maybe didn't live in the right place right at that time and weren't able to uh maybe have a family in the way that she was uh had the opportunity. And I think that if she had lived in New Jersey or lived in Texas or who knows, right, and lived in another country, I could easily not be here. And that's it's powerful, I think. Um and I'm grateful it worked out how it did.
Yes. Yes. Y'all are so touching. Um, yes. So, Pam, um, I want to well, there's two things that are coming up. I want to talk about the process, but also I'm just really present to the fact that the first abortion that you had when you were 18 had a lot to do with the circumstances of everything and just how difficult and painful and challenging that was to not be in a place where that would have been accepted or okay or any of the rest of that. And to have genuinely been in danger and to have these people care for you and uplift you and just make it possible for you to make it out to the life that you have now.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad for that. Glad to be here and unconsciously made the decision to have a new life. I just followed the moment. I know when I was working, and my coworker and I told our boss that we were going to California. Ha 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 ha! It was a big joke, and around the office, everybody thought it was funny. And week after week, we said, "Oh yeah, we're going to California." And then one day we went into the bathroom before work, and we were late for work, so they thought we'd left for California. And I told my parents I was going to California, and they said, "Oh, that would be a nice visit." I said, "No, I'm going to California." And I went. My coworker didn't go, but I went. And it was just one of those, started out as a joke, let's do this, and just go with it. Again, it's that 100% go forward until no becomes the answer. And it didn't come no, and I went. And I just was out to see whatever would happen, but I wasn't conscious of that. I was still drinking, so I wasn't conscious of much. And it took me, I don't know, 10 years to get sober. I got sober in 1980, kind of again on a whim, on just somebody said, go see this person, do this, do that, go to a meeting. And I was like, go, I went blindly forward. And I'm 44 years sober today.
Oh, today, hey, congratulations. Happy birthday.
Congratulations. Oh my God. Wow.
So,
Amen. Okay, so I want to talk now about the process, what that was like. You talked about putting postcards up in the Castro and all these other parts of the journey. So let's go through that.
well, after we had done that, we did get a response from a wonderful young man who was interested, and we met him and liked him. But in the end, he wanted to be very much involved. And at that time, we didn't want the person to be involved. Now, if it was today, I would definitely want that person involved. But at the time, so we let that go and I went to the sperm bank after we had broke up. And that was interesting. It was in San Francisco, and I only had a motorcycle, so I would ride my motorcycle over to San Francisco with like a cooler, but a small cooler with dry ice. So I would get the sperm and put it in the cooler with dry ice, and then I would drive it home and then go take it to the doctor. And it was quite a journey, certainly. And I got pregnant on I think it was the third try. And I didn't, I picked the donors, but it wasn't anything in particular that drew me to one or another. So when I got pregnant, I was ecstatic. I told everybody, people from my past that I didn't even talk to. The world needed to know. And within a couple of weeks, I went to the doctor and found out that it was not viable. The egg was not viable. And when they told me, I went into complete shock. I just like was walking zombie, and I had to cross the street to go to the lab to get some blood tests to have a DNC, a cleaning out of the system. And I walked into the lab and there were maybe 80 people in there. And I broke out in tears hysterically because there's no way I could have waited. I was just freaked out. So I was sobbing and sobbing, and two people came up to me and to comfort me, a man and a woman. And then the staff came out and they took me in right away. They, in front of everyone else, had the test, and the man walked me home because I live on the same street as Kaiser. So the man walked me home so I would be safe. And then, I went to work the next day. It was just, I just kept going. And I guess I didn't have a chance to feel my feelings, but I think I felt my feelings that day in the lab. I was hysterical. I was crying and just wailing. It never occurred to me that anything would go wrong. But on the other hand, when that moment happened that I found out I was not pregnant and no longer, I felt, what would make you think that anything that you wanted you would have? It was like a really negative, like, what, are you crazy? Of course you're not going to get what you want. Because in my family, I didn't get what I wanted or needed, which was love, understanding, communication, support, encouragement, education, those things. So I was kind of uh, in a state of shock for a while. And a couple of months later, I decided to try again. And I went to a sperm bank in Berkeley that had fresh sperm instead of frozen. And I picked I picked three because when I was ovulating, when the doctor told me I was ovulating, I had to do it then, that day, or within 24 hours at least. So I had to take the donor that was available that day, and they were mostly, I think, UC Berkeley students, young men. And so I got my third choice, and the only reason he was my third choice is because they didn't know him very well in the office because he was new, and so they couldn't tell me a lot about him.
So I'm the third choice, is what I'm hearing. All right. Well, so it wasn't what you were saying. You really, you worked really hard because it was what you wanted more than anything, but it wasn't really your first choice.
Oh, excuse me. Well, but I got the right one.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. It worked out. Okay.
It was the one I was meant to have, the one meant to be. And the donor was Italian and Spanish. And that's pretty much all I knew about him, that he did go to UC Berkeley. And that's it. And so I got pregnant that first time. I drove that sperm right to the doctor. I was older. I was 42 when I got pregnant. I was 43 when I had Jordan. So I had supportive doctors in the office. So they would take me right in. They knew what was going on, and they really accommodated me, I think, because of my age, knowing that it was a limited time when I could get pregnant. So I brought the sperm in and got pregnant and ate a lot of bean curd vegetable soup every day at the Chinese restaurant. It was my obsession. And then there was Jordan.
Beautiful. Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, I'd be interested in hearing maybe more, right? I'm sure Nika has more questions, but basically what you were just saying is, I got pregnant, right? And then ate a bunch of soup, and then there's Jordan, right? Like, you know, uh, the soup was the fuel, right? That's what it sounds like. And I imagine that there was, right? I mean, I know that I've heard that, it was both having a child, right? Like raising a child, and meaning me, right? And is difficult, right? And the whole process of getting to that point was difficult, I think. But I'm sure that the being pregnant, right? Being by yourself, mostly, right? Not having a partner, right? Um, I imagine that was difficult, right? And I'd love to hear more about that part.
Well, let's start with the birth story and make our way from there.
That was incredibly difficult. I was in my room sorting some clothes that people had given me and that I'd gotten. And all of a sudden, there was water on the floor. And I didn't know exactly what that was. I thought it was blood because the towel I had down was red. So I thought it was blood. I called my neighbors and they jumped over the fence because I couldn't move. I was sort of stuck in a crouched over position. I was in a lot of pain, and they carried me into their car and drove me a block away to the hospital. The people came down with the gurney, went in the elevator. It all seemed like it took a second, and then we were up in the room, and there were several people in the room, more than normal. And they told me to push, and I pushed 3 times, and he came out. He was ready. I was 8 days early, and they said that he would not cry when he came out because there was meconium, which is when the fetus or the baby has a bowel movement, a liquid bowel movement, and that was there. And so they wanted to be sure he wasn't going to swallow it. So they had to put their fingers down his throat so he wouldn't swallow it. And then he came out, and I don't know all of what they did, but they did put him on a table across the room to the left. It looked like an oak table, which it probably wasn't. And there were 2 women there, 2 nurses that looked like angels because I could see there was light around them. And they would pick his arm up and it would flop down on the table, pick his arm up and flop down on the table, which means that his APGAR score, which is his vitality, was very low. I think it was 1. So they took him away and put him on a supplemental oxygen, not on the face, but like over the head, like this, as he laid there. And I didn't see him for a couple hours, maybe 2 or something. And then they brought me in, and I was able to hold him at that point. And that's kind of all I remember of that. It was amazing to hold him, but I think, in a state of delirium, because I'd just been through this amazing experience that no one can imagine ever having until you have it. It was just this sort of a kind of an out of body experience. And I don't remember exactly what happened after that, except he was in there. We were both in there for a day. No, he was in there for a day. And then until he could be fed. And they gave him like an antibiotic at one point, which was the wrong one. He only had 1 dose of it. And then they realized it was the wrong one. And in the end, what had happened, which I didn't realize for like a year later, is that it affected his hearing. And he wasn't hearing exactly what I was saying. And I would say washcloth, and he'd say wathcloth. And I thought, well, that's what he heard. He said baby, but he heard that, and it wasn't what I was saying. But it hasn't affected his speech or anything like that. So I guess he just adapted. It was such a minor thing, but it was a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the moment, you don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you don't know how it's going to affect anything, I imagine.
He came out, he was about, I think, 6 pounds. He was, his forehead, he had only like mostly skin. He had lost all his body fat in the week before he was born. And they didn't exactly say but I felt that it was because I had never had a strong period. And I thought, well, gee, maybe I just wasn't enough blood. Although I have heard since that when you get pregnant, your body does produce enough blood. So somehow he didn't get the nourishment in that last week.
Mhm.
And his skin was hanging off he looked like a little old man. And, but as soon as he ate, he was fine. He, gained weight. He was healthy. He was happy. Well, he cried, but, uh, so it was interesting. And, I walked him home because I live a block away. And, I had a friend come and stay with me for a couple of weeks, to help me. It was kind of a little bit of a blur. I was so tired early on that he had a crib, like a rocking crib, or like a cradle kind of thing. And I tied the string around the cradle, and I tied the other end of the string around my foot, and I would lie in my bed and I'd move my foot back and forth so I could just rest and he could still get comforted in the cradle.
Mm.
And it was very difficult for the early years because he would cry, and all my old childhood stuff would come up about my parents. And he'd come running over to my bed at age 2 and like, get up, get up. And I would be like, ah, and I would run out of the room and slam the door, and he would bang on the door. And then I'd grab him and put him in the bathroom and close the door. And, it's like I didn't have the tools to know to just, when he was saying, get up, I could have just said, come on and lie in the bed with me, but I was reacting from my childhood traumas. And, it's like my father, like, no, I'm not going to get up. And so, I have regrets in that regard, but as most parents do, you have some regrets. Those just were mine.
Mhm.
So it was kind of rough. I didn't have anyone to uh, give me advice, anyone to talk about some of these things with, someone to guide me in the right direction. One day when he was little, it was cold out at night, and he was having some issue of trauma or whatever. Kids, they scream. And I picked him up and I took him to my neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and just handed him to my neighbor. It's like I didn't say anything. I went around the block, and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I came back, picked him up, and things were fine. But I just had to give him to someone because I couldn't handle it myself,
Mhm.
and in unknowingly, I think I did it because he needed to be safe from, me and
Mm.
my issues. So,
Got it. Got it.
As in, you felt that maybe you would uh, act as your parents. You had kind of alluded that your parents had in terms of like a bully way or maybe not considered way towards the safety of others, or right? Something, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, I'm hearing that getting away from perpetuating the cycles of abuse,
mhm.
how no matter what we do, they'll come back up and they'll come back up until we actually catch them and create something new. It's an active, conscious change.
Yeah.
Can,
And
yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I did do some bullying, and I did do some, creating scenes where I could be mad or whatever. It was just who I was at the time. And every day, it's taken me these 44 years of sobriety and the workshops I've been through and the therapy I've been through till I feel like just now I'm really finally getting close to being done with growing up.
Almost cooked.
Yeah.
uh, you said something earlier that I want to highlight. You talked about how giving birth was such a transformative out of body experience. And you can't go through it unless, like, you can't imagine it unless you know, unless you go through it. And I just wanted to highlight that because this episode is really talking about women having that opportunity and
Mhm.
having that gift. So when you said that, it just resonated, and I wanted to, call back. I'm also hearing that it sounds like you were probably experiencing some postpartum after Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
yeah. Um, so single parenthood. I know when we spoke before, there was a lot of joy, in having, yeah, in having this little one now. You got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what you always wanted, right? I mean,
Yeah,
wanted, right? I mean,
absolutely. And we did it all. We did it all from snow skiing, camping, hiking. Uh, we did a lot of dancing in the house. And all of these things, we, most of these things, or a lot of these things, we did with his group of friends. We developed a club. I developed a club, the House Street Hobos, which is what we called ourselves. And there were like five of us, five kids and me. And we did all these events. We had a indoor soccer team called the House Street Hobos, and we would have also Pammy Camp. We developed Pammy Camp, or we would get together and do things, or like we would go ice skating in downtown Oakland, or I don't even know what we just did a lot of stuff.
this was in the summers, right? And we would basically spend a whole week with whoever of my friends would want to show up or able to show up, right? And different go to different places on different trips for the whole week. So it could be going down to Santa Cruz to the boardwalk one day or 2 days in a row, right? And then going on maybe a 2-day camping trip right after that, or going to Six Flags, or going whatever on a hike, or whatever it is, right? Like, so that was Pammy Camp, right? And so we would do for several years at least, do one week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not necessarily back to back, but whenever people were available over the summer, right? We would, and doesn't necessarily have to be multiple friends. It could just be me and one of my best friends who, I've known forever, right? The three of us, my mom and my friend and me, right? Going on a trip, right? Or, going out to the river and camping and rafting or whatever it is. Um, so Pammy Camp is certainly well known, but um, yeah, I mean we almost everything I did, would say, um, that's not really true, but a lot of the things I would do, especially in the summer, and it was always with my mom, right? Not always, but um, I wasn't just going off and doing fun stuff with my friends and whatever, right? It was we were all doing fun stuff, I think. And yeah, had a great time. And I'm very lucky to have that experience, I think. Certainly not the experience that you had, right? Um and but that's what you wanted, I think, right? Is that, not well, yeah, is that you were saying that you had the most fun being goofy and silly, and you know um not necessarily thinking, but um just living and engaging with life, right?
One of
Right.
the memorable uh, experiences is when we were with his friend Easton up in the snow. We went to a Mexican restaurant. We were waiting for our food, and they had brought us some chips, and the kids were eating the chips. And I kept saying, "Excuse me." I kept saying, "Stop eating the chips! Stop eating the chips!" And then they would stop for a minute, and then they'd eat another chip. And all of a sudden, I just like it just came out of me, and I took my fist and I just smashed all the chips in the bowl and just little pieces. I was like, "No more chips!" And so
And not in an angry way, like in a funny way, right? We were all laughing, but la- laughing because it was funny, but also embarrassing and terrifying, just everyone looking around and she's smashing the chips and, you know, yeah. That was Pammy Camp. That was a typical Pammy Camp experience. It's a
Pammy
camp
Camp. I
experience.
want to go to Pammy Camp. I think Pammy Camp should be enjoyed by all. And it's very sweet. Like just the idea that you are going to take these children and go and enjoy an adventure and have some fun and enrich their lives.
Yeah.
Like that's a big part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so we talked a little bit about how like this was very normalized. I think you mentioned like you never even told Jordan because there was nothing to tell per se. Um, so I want to know from that space, Jordan, like what are you grateful for?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I have benefited greatly from the time and place that I was born, right, or raised. I think, um, I think I had mentioned to you previously that, um, yeah, I mean, the being in the Bay Area specifically, I think, and I, growing up in the late '90s and early 2000s, right? I having a gay mom and having a single mom, right, has never been, no one's ever given me a hard time or um, has ever questioned it really. I mean, they've questioned it as far as, oh, that's not something that I'm familiar with, right? As the other person would not be familiar with, and maybe want to know more and think that that's cool, right? And so that's, I have not. Um, I've never been othered for it, I would say. I've never felt that at least. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think certainly that's part of growing up where I did and when and being in a uh, I want to say more progressive, but society, or environment. But also never having felt that I was lacking anything, right? There's not, well, there wasn't, like you said, there was nothing missing because it was just my life, right? I didn't, it's not like I had a father and lost him, I mean, I think, a lot of people experience that or, there might be, um, relationship difficulties and for a mother that there is a father in the distant picture, right? There can be, I would imagine, her, difficult feelings or feelings of maybe feelings of resentment. I don't know. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, of course, but that their things didn't work out and they are having to raise the child by themselves or choosing to raise the child by themselves and that they're potentially another alternative, right? And my situation, there is not an alternative. I mean, the alternative maybe would be, having if my mom had a partner, right, and they chose to have a child together, I suppose. But there's this path that I'm currently on, or that we experienced, right, is the only path that was ever intended, I would say, right? Um, and so, what else is there to want? I suppose, is it's one, obviously it's very clear that my mom wanted a child very bad, right, and has said that she didn't um really think about any of it ahead of time, right, other than this is what I want now and I'm going to keep doing it until it happens, right? It's not there, well, it doesn't um I don't want to say that there's no forethought because that's certainly not true, but um it's the only path that was ever intended, I suppose. And so that combined with not, you know, being made to feel that I was on a that was experiencing something, you know, either unintended or weird or No, yeah, I mean, um, I don't feel any different than any of my other friends who have more traditional, like a nuclear family, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, I would certainly say that anyone who is considering a similar path, right, as a parent, you know, that's, I mean, certainly there are other kids who may have experienced different things than I experienced growing up, right? But I would say that I don't think that that should be a concern of theirs. As if it's what you want, right, to have a family, or to have a child, right, um, that I think that there's a reasonable amount of concern or worry, for anything. That is this going to be right? Right? Is the my child that I'm bringing into this world going to um, experience hardship because of the decisions I'm making? Right? But I think if it's what you want, then you're going to put yourself in the situation to make it right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our children can be hurt by any of the choices we make, this topic aside, it can happen. And that's not what happened. I think the beautiful thing, there's a lot of people out there who are not ready to have these conversations out loud, but to know that they're available for whatever is going on with them inside of them is really beautiful. One of the things that I'm really getting from this episode too is that this is a conversation of choice. Like so thoroughly through and through from end to end, from what was going on in the 70s and the abortion all the way to now what's going on in 2025 with this beautiful child who came through all of your work and determination to be a parent, to get that thing that you needed. So I think it's really, really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. I mean, if we have time, I think, one thing that we had a previous conversation about this was that, um, I think, Mom, you had mentioned that, um, you kind of hadn't had thought of having a child until somebody mentioned it and said, "Oh, you should do this," right? That, I guess you were saying that your partner you had at the time, right, was, you know, it brought up the idea, the gave the suggestion, and I think I don't want to, can you explain that story maybe? I think that's a powerful story for people.
To me that I could go to a sperm bank and get that. But once I expressed that I wanted to have a child, and this partner I had at the time, she's like, "Well, just do it. Just look at that and see." And then I want to say that I was canvassing door to door for child sexual abuse programs. And so I've knocked on a million doors and talked to a lot of people. And one night I knocked on the door and a young girl came to the door and I said, "Can I speak to your mom?" And so her mom came to the door and she was an older mom. And I was so surprised. And I just forgot about everything I wanted to say about raising money. And I asked the woman if she could talk for a minute, and she said yes. And I asked her what it was like to be an older mom and have a young child. And she said the only fear she had at the time, and I guess her kid was maybe 6, was that her daughter would be afraid that she would die because she was, as she got older, the kid got older, the mother was going to get older as well. And it was just in that moment, I was like, if she can do it, I can do it.
Mhm.
She seemed fine with that, with her. And I didn't ask her if she had a partner. I didn't ask her anything about the father at all, but just it was her age. And she kind of was giving me the go ahead, like just okay. And I even knew further that it was time to do it.
Mhm.
I better do it now.
Jordan, thank you. Thank you for presenting that story. Um, I'd wanted to touch on that earlier in the episode, so I'm glad that we did not forget it or leave it behind. The other thing that came up in our other conversation, and I don't know I don't know if you two actually ever answered it, but I'd love to get your opinions on, abortion being illegal now and that conversation. I know we're again fortunate and very privileged to be here in the state of California, and not everyone who is listening or watching this actually is.
Mhm. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I always believed in abortion. I think I feel like no one should have a child unless they want to have a child. It doesn't benefit the child. It it could work out okay, certainly, but also if you resent the child, if you don't want the child, and if you can't afford the child, or if you don't know how to deal with being pregnant or having a child, then you shouldn't have to. And I certainly know that if abortion became illegal in this country, there would be a lot of illegal abortions like the one I had, and I could have died. I the My uterus had tilted. I found out, years later, through this whole process with the coat hanger, and it could have been toxic. I could have had somebody who wasn't didn't know what they were doing it. Um, I don't know what it cost because I didn't pay for it. My friend's father did, but I'm all for abortion, not as birth control particularly, but as an alternative. We're women. We should have a choice as to what we do with our bodies. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, not certainly. I'm not the one to be speaking on this, but I think, yeah, it's it's scary where we're going, right? I mean, this is, I people have different beliefs, right? But um, this is what she experienced in what, 69 or 70, right? Something like that. And it's like, that it's going to be 2025 in 2 weeks, and um, that having to go underground, right, effectively uh, to have control of your life, right, to have just to be able to make your own decision about when's the right time and what you I mean, if yeah, what you want to do, and what you having the opportunities um in front of you, right? I mean, if you had a child in 1970, you probably wouldn't have come to California. I mean, I don't know, but so many things would be different, right? Instead you had a child 23, 24 years later, and that's just to say that you had a child 24 years after you almost had one is notable, right? But um I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling, but I think that it's scary to think that um you said that you went to all these appointments that were not legitimate, and that it's you know
Thank you. It's it's a journey, and I'm so grateful for both of you. Um, Anything on the memoir or anything before we wrap up? Are we gonna see that somewhere? Is it personal?
I don't know. It would be fun. It's fun writing it, and I feel like it's changed me quite a bit. I feel more happy and more accepting, and just I feel like a weight has been lifted, and I see that all the things that I did adventure wise are so worth it and so much more important than the negative stuff in my childhood. Yeah, that's the life that I wanted to live, and I got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
for
thanks
having
for having
us, and
me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
both so
What were you saying,
much.
Mom?
So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up, but I definitely want you two to stick around for us to have a little after chat. Yes, and thank you. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us today. This is the It Cast, Real Talk on Sex, our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. This was our series finale, and we're so grateful to have had you join us. We are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected, and we're going to continue to do that far beyond the now. These episodes have been brought to you by the House of Sherelle and Trigger Happy Toys. You can find out more at triggerhappytoy.com. Also, the International Institute for Sexual Empowerment, a 501c3 nonprofit that creates safe spaces to talk about sex. You can check out the upcoming events there at iiseglobal.org on the calendar, and then you can also find more events at nikashirels.com. Contact me for one-on-one coaching. I look forward to supporting with you. Please book a free connection session on my Calendly. Ask me anything. I would love to know how I can help. Get access to our bonus content on Patreon, learn more about the ItCast and the rest of this work at theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. Thank you, everyone, so much. And
This is fun.
this was fun.